Hi, today we're going to show off a build that I like with the Mongols for a fast trade into a fast castle. This build comes in two parts. One is going to be the fast trade opening, and then the follow-up will be the fast castle. Now, the opening itself, I like in a lot of different builds these days, but I think the fast castle is one of the more interesting, one of the more impressive ones, so that's what I'm going to show up as a follow-up. But depending on what your opponent's doing, the map spawn, things like that, you might adjust how you want to handle your transition out of the opening here. Um, the fast castle itself, I like a lot versus English if they're not going a feudal all in, or some other civilizations that might be looking to do more of a boom response, even if they see you trading. If somebody's going to be putting you under heavy pressure or really getting units out quickly, like say the Ottomans would, you might want to opt for something that's a little more unit heavy at the start. You can still get a very fast castle using the fast traders, but it would be slower than what you're going to see here. This is kind of an idealized version. So we're going to start with the build and get going right away. The first thing you'll notice is that we are not going to move our TC. We are actually going to deploy it immediately where it spawns. With the Season 3 straggler trees, we can secure wood 450 wood at least with our initial TC placement. And the initial TC placement right away will let us do two things. In addition, we will get basically about half a villager extra, which is going to be about 20 resources a minute for the whole duration of the game. Um, this is just because the TC is going to come out a lot faster and will save time. We can move the TC later, and at what point you're trading away, that villager, maybe half another villager, to move the TC with superior mobility. But that'll be later in the game, so it's kind of less impactful to take the economic hit then. But in this case, we're just going to leave it where it is. We'll defend our wood line with a tower and some units, and it'll be great. The other thing this fast opening gets you is that the sheep will be available to harvest right away. Annoyingly, it's still going to go to the opposite side of the TC, so you don't quite get an instant food harvest. It'd be nice if Mongol sheep spawn down here or something, but that's not how it works. But we will still be able to get onto the sheep in about 8 or 9 game seconds. Whereas if you move the TC, you can move the sheep with the TC, but the fastest you're going to get on the sheep is still about 20 seconds. So we're also gaining 10 seconds of food harvesting for the 5 villagers, and then it'll be great. So we can kind of slowly show this at slow speed, just to show you everything that happens right away. So I've already clicked the TC to deploy it. Ideally, you want it right where the TC is so it doesn't move at all. It's going to eject all the units. So the ger will let it go on his own. The villagers, we're going to let them get ejected on their own. The con we do want to grab. We want to use signal maneuver arrow just to get the con moving, and then we want to move it around the TC. You either want to go around the top or around the bottom, because the con's always going to get ejected to the north east. That's just how Mongols spawn, and you want to go around accordingly. You have to make sure 100% that the con does not run back into the TC. So you want to be going around, and you do want to run towards any sheep if you happen to see them. So in this case, I want the con to run clockwise. I'm not sure if I actually do that, but if I saw the sheep in time, I'd make it run clockwise just so I could pick up the extra sheep. And so we'll see that go right away. Now, once the TC actually footprints, you don't want to touch your villagers into that. So even if you're faster, you want to just make sure that you don't really move the villagers in that time. If you're really fast, you might be able to get the Ovoo villager started, but you want to make sure that they're not going to run back into the TC, because then that'll delay the deployment, defeats the whole purpose of not moving it, and you've just kind of tanked your opening. So now that the TC is deployed though, I'm going to select my villagers, put them on sheep, take one villager, put it to the Ovoo, and then very importantly, as that's happening, I do want to take the sheep and move it back into the TC. Now, when the TC is deploying, the behavior that's going to be a little tricky, so make sure you really work at it. And if you don't know, the way to get the sheep back into the TC is to use a formation movement, so click and drag. So, I'd right click and move command and then drag into the TC, and then that'll encourage the sheep to move in. So you can see here I do that. The sheep's going to be right under the TC. It's going to be the optimal food collecting. Now, as the con goes, I'm going to pick up the initial sheep. I want to rally them back to the TC, as you do, and get them under. So the first villager I queue up, and you do also want to make sure, this is kind of timing sensitive as well. Of course, you want the villager queued immediately when the TC drops. If there is a delay, um, you're again kind of defeating the point of this opening. So you really want to be tight with this initial opening. Definitely recommend practicing it a lot before you take it onto ladder and do anything with it. So the sheep here is going to come back to the TC, and then when I have time, the go is going to go to the gold up here. You do have time if you see, say, a sheep here. I could move the ger there, deploy, collect the sheep, pack it up, and then deploy it here to be ready for gold mining. This is not an opening where you can scout with the ger because we're going to be going on gold right away. So it is one of the trade-offs for this type of opening. But it's very efficient economy-wise, and it's going to get us a very, very fast feudal. So the sheep's going to come in. This villager is going to build the Ovoo and then go on to gold. Now, the reason why we're aiming for the very fast feudal is that it's going to allow us to get out traders earlier. The earlier we get out traders, the more guaranteed we can make their first drop off of gold. It's very easy to maybe harass or stop some traders at 6.5 minutes, 7 minutes. It's a lot more difficult when they're already on the way back at 5.5 minutes, and you're trying to stop you know traders that don't really need to make it that far to make a drop off. Um, so now the con's going to go scout. You want just good scouting practices. We are on food first, so you do want to make sure at the start that you have about 3 sheep. That'll last you roughly a minute and a half to 2 minutes. Um, but then ideally you want to get up to 4, 5, 6 sheep because then we can optimize how we collect them, make sure that we're not having all the villagers bonk a sheep at the same time and things like that. So you do kind of want to scout in a pattern, ideally, something maybe radial around your base where you can pick up a few sheep, drop them off, and then have the con actually scout the full map. Something else you need to do is you do need to secure the market locations or just identify them. So on a map like Lipany, which is where we're at right now, they can spawn in a few different configurations, and we can react based on that. Now, I will say this strategy does work on most maps I find, but if you do get, say, like a dry Arabia or Lipany where your market's here somewhere in the middle or here somewhere in the middle, it will be difficult to get enough gold from the initial round of traders. So the trading still works, but you might not transition it into a fast castle. You might be looking more at something like, a feudal build up or like a 9-10 minute caster, and then you'll make some optimizations and differences in terms of how you distribute your workers. And maybe I'll cover that in a different video sometime. All right, so now we're off, and what we're going to do is send our first villager to food. So we'll have 6 on food, and ideally on a new sheep. And you want to pull the sheep under the TC. I don't think I quite get it under the TC, but it ends up close enough. Your Ovoo villager will go to gold, as you can see, and then the second villager I rally will go to food, or sorry, to gold. So I'm going to end up with 6 on food, 2 on gold to start. One advantage of this too is if you do get something like Men at Armed Rush in Dark Age, you will have gold for age up well before the Men at Arm arrives. It'll really be about exactly the same time. So um, you can't necessarily trade off of that, though. Depending on how they're handling Men at Arms, you might be able to get the traders out and get your horsemen up in time. Um, but you won't be as impacted by that Men at Arms. You will still make your feudal. You can still drop something like a stables, racks, or range, and defend that Men at Arms pressure. So that's kind of nice. I would say maybe watch out on the pit. Keep that in mind. The pit is especially vulnerable to this, and in that case, the Men at Arms might arrive earlier than you're really able to handle. Um, so you need to kind of be ready for that. But most maps, the Men at Arms will be slow enough where you have a pretty good handle of it. So now we have the 6 on food and the 2 on gold. We're going to rally up to 9 on food. Now, while I'm doing this, each villager that's going to come out is going to go onto a different sheep, again, to optimize the sheep performance. Ideally, you can also shift click away from the TC and then onto the sheep. I don't do that in this example, but that will prevent the TC bug where sometimes villagers on food. You can see here, this villager came out on this side and has to wrap around. So this is actually going to cost me a little bit in terms of the build efficiency. It's not major, but it's something you can optimize. You can shave, another maybe 4 or 5 seconds off. Hopefully someday they fix that bug and you don't have to do that. So you can see I made my first delivery of sheep. So I have, about 7 sheep here now, which is, kind of something you can typically expect to be able to drop off. I might drop off some additional sheep here, but you'll see later I'm going to kind of act like I don't get a whole lot of sheep against the AI, just to show something that's a little more realistic. Now, also while I'm in this point of the game where there's not too much to do, I do want to take villagers. You can age up in this strategy using either 4 or 5 villagers. I would generally do 5. 4 is more of if you expect really early pressure. Something where you might want your production building out a little bit sooner. But in this example, I will use 5. Now, when I do 5, the food is going to be incredibly tight. So you might need to make manual drop-offs. What I actually do is I queue 4 for the landmark. So I'll put 4 on my second hotkey so they're ready to go when I'm ready to start to feudal. And then I'll take a 5th villager and put them on a different hotkey, my 3. And then I will have the 5th villager kind of start on the landmark, kind of join the landmark, basically after I've queued the next villager up from the landmark. So, I'll let them do a drop off, maybe a drop off and a half. And that's just to give me that tiny bit of buffer so I don't have to do manual drop offs for the rest of Dark Age because we will end up aging up. And there'll only be 4 left on food, as you'll see. So once I get up to 9 on food and 2 on gold, I'm going to start rallying to the straggler trees. Now, for rallying to the straggler trees, you want to rally to one tree, then the next, then the third, then put a second on the third, back to the second, back to the first. So basically balancing the straggler trees, that'll let them all kind of start to depreciate and run out at the same time. And will give us the ability to not have the villagers wander from straggler tree to straggler tree. So, when they come up to these straggler trees and use them for wood, that's fine. It's close enough to the TC. It's really not that inefficient. But we don't want them, say, finishing from this tree, walking to this tree, then finishing this tree very quickly because there's now 4 villages on it, and then walking to this tree. And then, that's a lot of wasted time. So ideally, what you want to do is you want them to finish up the tree they're at and then proceed to the wood line. And we'll have some measures in place to, basically ensure that they get to the wood line before that happens. There's a go there. So this will be my last villager on food. And now I'm going to start rallying to the straggler trees. Now, when I have my 14th villager queued, so you can see right here, I'm going to be up to 14 population. Sorry, that's I guess the 13th villager because 14 population in the con, or 13 villagers in the con. Now I want to stop queuing villagers for the moment and get ready to be able to drop my age up. So at this point, you can see I'm just about to hit 200 gold. This will be, plus or minus a couple seconds depending on how far the gold is from the Ovoo and the gold is from, your TC. But you can see also we're at about 206. So if there were, say, a men-at-arms rush coming, it would be about 10 seconds usually before they get here. So I would have that 200 gold secured. And it'll make aging up a lot easier. Now, I will be building the silver tree directly under the influence of the Ovoo, basically as close to the TC as I can. So the villagers will be under TC protection. The silver tree will be immediately under the influence because I don't want to have a delay in producing the traders. If you were opting to move the tree and then make the traders, you can do that, but then you're delaying the traders, which kind of partially defeats the point of getting the traders out early for the faster drop off and faster initial drop off to pay off for themselves. So you see here in a moment, right when I hit about this like 360, 370, I'm going to move out these villages. I know the gold's coming. They've made the silver tree. And now you can see I have a villager almost done and no food for another villager. And that's why I leave the 5th villager on here. I can't tell from Hockey's replay. I think it's this villager here, but you can see they're going to make a drop off. If I had sent them with the other villagers, they would drop maybe 7 food off and then go. But here they're going to get 10. It's going to help me just make that extra gap to drop off. And you see I should be able to just about make it. Yep. And so I just made it, and now this villager can go join them. So, it's a little second later than you would ideally like. And sometimes if you have all the food optimizations in place, you can send 5 right away, and it's not a big deal. Alternatively, you can also force the drop-offs every time you need to queue up the next villager, but that has inefficiencies. And you see even here, I think I probably have a slight delay, maybe in this villager or the next one. Just because I didn't do that drop off while I was doing this. Yeah, so you can see here I have a small delay. If I had manually dropped off, I'd had plenty of food to queue it right away. I've now got my tree, my straggler trees kind of balancing. I'm about to locate the market, which is in here in this corner. And so everything's good. Um, and again, I think I probably have a couple TC drops here in terms of queuing. Like I could have queued that one immediately, and I was, apparently a couple seconds late, which is pretty bad. So you do want to make sure, you're on top of things, but it's good enough for the example here. All right, now my silver tree is going to finish soon, and there's a couple of ways you can go out of this. So the first things you want to spend wood on are going to be two sets of two traders and a production building. And you can do those basically in any order depending on the game state. So you know, if you're scouting the opponent by this point, which usually you are, in this case, I unfortunately didn't quite get to the corner right away. So, I needed to move my con all the way around to, verify the market was there, even though I was pretty sure it was there. That's not really something you'd do in a real world game scenario. I'd probably just send the scouts there, or sorry, the traders there right away because already knew that the market wasn't in the middle of the map, but I knew it wasn't along the rest of the border. But in general, I'm playing the NCI, so I wasn't too worried about scouting the opponent. But usually you would have, scouting the opponent at this point. You'd have a sense of what they're doing, and you might tailor how you transition from here. Um, Based on that. I'm going to go in this example just the fastest traders. This is something you do if you're expecting, your opponent to be a little bit behind in unit production. Maybe if they're doing like a, 2-2 open as English, or if you saw them trying to go into stone for a second TC, you know that, um, their units would be a little more delayed. They would be able to get the spearman and their archer maybe across the map at like 445, maybe 510, something like that, to really get to the units over there. And if that's the case, if they're kind of hitting that like 520, 530 mark, you have plenty of time to get units out still and kind of pressure them off the traders if they do go for them. And you also see the traders will be, pretty far along. And it'll be difficult for your opponent to kind of even locate them potentially. Now, this map in this trade post in a real game is not the most defended. There's kind of trade-offs depending on where the trade post is on maps like this. If it's over here, I'm going to get a faster pickup, which is nice. It kind of ensures that I've secured the side of the market very early. It'll actually give me the earliest drop-off, so it kind of keeps all the timings tight. If the market's over here, my total distance the traders would have to travel is quite a bit more. Um, so I would have a slower drop off, but it does also mean that on the earlier timing, I'm picking up the gold, and then my traders are coming back as my opponent is coming towards me, so I'm defending closer to my base. So either way it happens, there's different trade-offs. If you're on a map like Altai, obviously you're kind of equidistant from the market no matter what usually. So it doesn't matter so much, or even maps like Killendale or some of the newer maps that are getting added in. So it's kind of a long-winded way of saying, where the market is can also depend on how you want to order the production buildings and the traders. And so, like I said, you can do it in any order. So you can do one set of traders, the production building, second set of traders. That's looks pretty well. Or you can just do the production building, then the four traders. So here we'll see it start to go. So I'm going to queue up the double traders, send them to the market. And then once the second set of traders produces, whatever you do it in, you want to pick up the silver tree and put it in the corner to get the maximum gold drop off. Now, in terms of villager resources, these villagers are going to go back to food, and I'm going to keep going on to about 6 on wood here. Now, the other thing you want to do is we do want to take these villagers off of gold. Depending on the unit and how you want to open, you may or may not do this. In this case, I'm going to make horsemen. This would be kind of ideal again for like an English opponent, though it might apply in other situations where you want to use horsemen as your starting unit. Um, so what you want to do is at about 95 gold. You can go a little bit over. You can go 95 or 25 more than that, so that would be 120. You want to pull these villagers off of gold and take the go with it. So 95 gold is going to give us 4 traders and a horseman upgrade. And that'll get us started on all the gold we need for the very early game. 120 gold will give us that plus a tower with arrow slits, which is pretty useful. If we're expecting to have to defend from say an English player, something the arrow slits will be very useful. And I will drop a tower in this example. So I'm going to pull these off. Now you can see my goal is 90, but I already have one set of traders, so I'm right about that 120 mark. And now I'm going to send this ger to the wood line. Usually I like to do the wood line first, gets production and uh, maybe a tower out a little bit earlier, as well as make sure that the straggler trees can transfer successfully. If you are doing, say, the production earlier, or if if you feel kind of comfortable, you can also send the gear and the workers straight to food, and then put them on food. So that'll slow down how quickly you can build a tower, how quickly you can make your production building or your first set of, say, horsemen. But it will conversely just give you a little bit of a faster castle timing, and it'll get you kind of set up there. In this case, I actually don't even have to choose because I do have the berries, right here up against the wood line. So that's nice. It's not mandatory that that happens. This build works even if you have to secure a second, a food source potentially with another gur, but this is kind of just an optimization I can make. So we're going to do that. We're going to send these here, and I have my second set of traders are queued up, and I'm going to wait to 150 gold and then build my production building. Now, something you can do too, once you have a gur on the wood line, is with all the villagers and the straggler trees, you can shift click them to the wood line. So when they finish this tree, I think they'll generally on their own go over to the wood line, which is what you want. You don't want them, again, you don't want them going from straggler tree to straggler tree because that wastes their efficiency. So my goods picked up, silver trees picked up, and it's heading out to the corner. You can see we're still at 426, so this is, in a lot of cases, just about the time when your opponent is hitting feudal themselves, and you already picked up gold from the market with two of the village traders, and the other two are on their way. Um, so now that I have about 6 on wood, plus the 2 building the stable, my production building, I'm going to start rallying to food. In this case, I'll rally to these berries because I'll run out of sheep if I put everyone on sheep, essentially. Um, which is not, we can build pastures and everything. It's not a huge deal. But in this case, I am going to be using food on the map. So again, you're going to have to react to your opponent. Your timers are going to adjust based on that. But we're going to go, in this case, for food from the sources. So I'll be getting from these berries. And then later I'm going to put a gur and gather from these deer. With the additional wood, I can now do things like make a tower, and with the stables complete. So first I want to make sure that I'm queuing units. In this defense for the early castle, I'm going to make 4 horsemen and upgrade them. That's something you'll see if you watch, for example, BCQD's Season 2 Mongols. Basically 4 horsemen, the upgrade, and a tower is what he uses to defend for his castle timing. So, we're doing something comparable here, but we're doing it with the traders. So we'll make the 4 horsemen. I'm going to put a tower here, which is going to protect the berries and the wood line. And you notice that, my wood line's far away, but in this case, I have the TC here, which is going to protect the wood line from this side. I have the range for it. And then a tower here will protect the wood line from this side, as well as securing the food. So even though our wood is more exposed, it's relatively safe. And exactly how exposed and how safe it's going to be is going to depend on the map. So you need to gauge kind of where you're at. Again, you can slow your timings a bit. You do have enough wood to potentially drop a second tower. So for example, if the TC here was like over here, I could put a tower here, I'd have a secure wood line, I'd still have secure food, I'd have my sheep, and whatnot. So you have to adapt and find a way to make yourself secure. And again, also we can use this trade opening, and instead of, say, going for this fast feudal, I could be putting 8, maybe 10 on wood, and doing more unit production, more production buildings, more towers, and secure myself that way. So now you can see the traders are off. I'm rallied onto food. I am going to, like I said, drop a gur here and start on the steer. I have plenty of sheep, but I'm against easy AI, so I probably picked up a little more sheep than you can expect. So I don't really want to do something that's relying on that. You can see 5:30, I have about my horsemen out. Again, we could get these out earlier if we do the protection first, then to traders. But then obviously the traders would be a little bit behind in terms of when they drop off. And so we have the silver tree going, they'll deploy, these traders will drop off. You can see even these traders are a little bit ahead of where we'd want them to be. They're going to catch up the tree. This is kind of a spawn where the silver tree is not going to make it all the way just because we are so close to this corner with the market. and this was even closer, the Ovoo. So things can vary a bit, and surely the exact gold you're going to get varies a lot. It can be anything up to like 240 for a drop off, which will get you about 800 gold from the four traders, or you can get as little as like 600. Something you do want to watch out for is if the America's in the middle of the map, kind of like I mentioned, you'll get less than 600 gold, and the strategy won't work because you won't have enough for aging up with the gold that we want to spend on aging up. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about the trader economy here and how this is working. So, a lot of the strategy for this early trading and the castle out of it is that these traders I've spent 360 resources on. So, each pair is 90 stone, 60 wood, 30 gold from Silver Tree. So that's 180 for each pair, 260 for the quartet of them. Um, they will drop off and make about 800 resources generally. So already I'm making um, about a 500 profit if all four of them drop off. If two of them drop off, I break even, which is pretty good. You can certainly play a Mongol from a position where, if this was Deer Stones, I'd be in a very similar position as I am now, just kind of going very fast castle. Um, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? So as long as at least two of them jump off, I'm not really behind necessarily, especially if I get a favorable trade for my opponent having to go after my traders, which is something you can do, right? If they had a spearman on these traders and has attacking them with horsemen, the spearman has to choose, right? And it's very, you can micro and dance, and it's going to be very difficult for them to both kill the traders and get a favorable trade on the units. So you have a lot of room kind of for advantage here in these early trades. Now, again, if all four traders drop off, I get about 800 resources. So, that's about a 500 profit, but it's actually even a little bit better than that. So one of the things you obviously can't do as Mongols is take stone and turn it into teching up or aging up. There's no way to put that towards, that resource. It's stone. You can only spend it on units. You can spend it on the text, but in feudal, there's not really any improved text that you really want to get. The improved economy texts are kind of marginal. The I think there's some experimenting that can happen there, but they're not the best. I can make towers with them, but how many towers do I really want? So stone can be very difficult to use in feudal very well. So basically the way I see it, in addition to the 500 resources I'm making, I'm also taking 180 stone and turning that into gold, which is a great deal for me. So I'm really, really coming out ahead on here, I feel like. And so we're going to go. The traders are going to jump off. I think these traders might even jump off before. Yeah, you can see um, even if the silver tree is moving, these traders will drop off to it in some cases, and they will get the full amount based on exactly where the silver tree is. Um, I haven't quite experimented with this fully, but I believe the way it works is that if the silver tree is uprooted by the time the traders turn around, they will chase the uprooted silver tree and they'll drop off to it like this. If the silver tree is rooted when they turn around, they will actually head to where the silver tree was. And then when the silver tree deploys again, they will change directions and head towards the silver tree. So if that starts happening to you, like for example, if these traders were heading back towards here where the silver tree is, and then the silver tree is not here, they would actually just sit here idle until the silver tree deploys. But what you can do is you can start deploying the silver tree. The traders will redirect towards it. You stop the deployment so the silver tree doesn't waste a bunch of time, and then you move the silver tree, and then they'll be chasing the silver tree towards you where you want them to go. So you can kind of manage the silver tree like that and make sure the traders are efficiently going there and getting the correct drop off. Um, because these ones did drop off a little bit early, I am going to get a little bit less gold. You can see these ones are going to return about 170, which is what you can expect on most maps. So it's a little unfortunate. It's going to slow our timings down just a tad bit, but it's not too big a deal. Now, otherwise, what's happening? I've made my, four horsemen. Obviously, I'm not doing anything with them because I'm against the AI. But with these horsemen, if I was against an opponent, what you'd want to do is something sort of like this. The initial horsemen, you want them to be protecting your traders. Um, and you kind of want to use the con and the trader, the horseman, to just essentially know what your opponent's doing, where their units are going, where they might either be intercepting your traders. You do also want to make sure they're not, just coming towards your villages to disrupt your economy, and you kind of want to manage yourself like that. So, you have to play around and get used to the positioning and how you can gain vision on where your opponent's going. Once you have any sort of, may say, confirmation your opponent hasn't moved out, or that these traders have made the drop off. So for example, in this game state, once these traders drop off, I'm now free to take these horsemen and start being aggressive with them. So I could harass my opponent's gold, do things head more towards them as long as they know where their army is. So part of the strategy is that we're not actually going to be too concerned with these traders making a second drop off. We've already gotten our 700 gold from them. If they drop off again, that's a huge benefit to us. We do want to, not just throw them away, but we aren't going to care as much if they drop off a second time, because what we're going to focus on are things that are going to us more ahead in the way that Mongols are traditionally ahead. We're not going for a trade boom here. We're using the trade to just slingshot our build ahead in the very early game. Now, later on, as you're going, if you're fighting in castle, if you're doing things like that, you can make more traders. You can use this essentially in place of, like, say, a second TC, and do things like that. We have options there, and we can certainly do things that'll benefit us with the traders. But really, for this early opening, we're only concerned with getting this first drop off with all 4 traders. Um, So that's why you can take the horseman, be aggressive, do things that might, either surprise our opponent or make it harder for them to do things. One example that you might see on, say, Altair, Hill and Dale, which I know aren't in the pool anymore, but serve as good examples, is that, opponent might come, they might drop a tower or a wall on your market, especially in a configuration like this where you only have one market. They can be like, okay, I'm going to drop a tower here. But because we're only really caring about the first drop off, that tower is helping us. It's going to help these horsemen be more aggressive. It's going to help catch their army out of position because they probably need to put some spearmen here to protect the villager making the tower. And it gives us an opening that we otherwise wouldn't have without costing us anything. These traders have already paid for themselves. We don't need to worry, if they die, we're not behind. We're just even, or, ahead the amount that we want it to be. Um, so yeah, so there's a lot of good you can do with these traders dropping off this early. And you can see in terms of timings too, we're at about 6:18. We've already gotten our 2 drop-offs. Some builds, depending on who you're playing, they might not even have their first unit out until about 5:15, 5:30. Really not a lot of time for them to get here and disrupt this trade route. Um, so you can see kind of the advantage of it being so early coming into play. Now, in terms of villagers, we're still rallying to food. I put them on berries here. I could just put them on sheep again because I have a lot of sheep, but it's kind of not a realistic scenario. I pulled down to 4 on food. I did that because of my configuration with the berries and the deer that I'm going on here. You might otherwise keep on, say, 6 to 8 on food. On wood, so that you can build pastures and you can, be more reliant on your sheep and not have to be quite so spread out on the map um, for everything. It'll slow down your castle maybe by, a little bit, but you can still get a very good castle, like a sub 9 castle out of this, and do a lot of good. But otherwise, we're going to go all the way up to 20 on food. Once you get 20 on food, I start rallying back to wood because we want to start getting ready for some wood from infrastructure. If you had, say, maybe 8 on wood, by the time you get 20 on food, you'd be ready to go castle. Now, something else you can do is if you have over, I think over like 7, what's the initial one, 130? Yeah, 130. If you have over 730 gold, you can buy, uh, buy a 100 food. Generally, I'd rather have the gold. Um, it depends again on game state and everything, but with the extra gold, it'll let us put out a unit earlier because obviously we're not going to be getting much gold as we age up because we don't really have anyone on gold at the moment. But otherwise, we're just going to kind of take our time, get up to the 1200 food, and you can see, we're at 720, 730, we're almost there. I could probably do a forced drop off and start the age up a little bit sooner, but I don't, well, here I do in this case. And then we're going to start aging up with about, 8 to 10 on the landmark. Now, in terms of landmark choice, it's a little bit up to you. If I wanted to, I could go with curl tie, put a ger here. I could be starting to get some gold during age up. If I was going to do that, how I would handle that is I would have the 10 on age up like you see here. Sorry, still about 9 to 10 on food. You don't want to really go below that because I'm going to need food when I age up. And then maybe I would take from 8 down to 4 on gold, make the ger here, start getting some gold so that I can do some stuff right as I hit castle. And now you might do that if you have your trade is going well. If you feel pretty confident they're going to make a second drop off, and you just kind of want to be able to take advantage of that gold tile, which is pretty powerful. It's something I do in team games if I do this kind of opening and strategy. I'll handle it in team games a little bit differently anyways. I'm more likely to go manga die in a team game. But out of this age up, I might do cold tie just because I can take advantage of that damage bonus and put a lot of pressure with it. Um, but because I don't have a full trade route, and I'm not really necessarily intending or able to get a full one, because again, my opponent might have put a tower here, they might have walled it off. I do like Steppe Redoubt. With the early castle timing, makes my economy very dominant to have the plus 50% gold drop off, and it's just kind of a lot safer if something happens to the trade later on in the game. So that's what you'll see here. If the goal was a little bit closer, I could even actually like this, if maybe my food was closer to the gold, I could just put it right on the gold because my village is different than TC, but obviously, there's always a threat that you're going to get attacked, so the closer to the TC, kind of the more safe it is to do it. Again, do it based on the game and how the game's going. Now, while I'm aging up, I want to drop some additional production. I prefer barracks the most out of this. Because I'm not mining gold, I don't have a lot of gold. So nights are going to be difficult. It take me a while to queue up my first night. And I also particularly say, again, I'm kind of doing this as if I was against an English opponent. I think the men-at-arms are really effective out of this fast castle against English. Obviously, you nullify the longbowmen. You're good against the spearmen that they're going to use to back up the longbowmen when you have horses. Even if they have their men-at-arms, they're much weaker until they hit castle, and their castle is going to be slower than yours. So, you're in a good position with men-at-arms, and I have plenty of resources to double queue men-at-arms for a little while. I'm also going to make, in this case, a second barracks and a armory out of this. Sorry, a blacksmith out of this, and I like the blacksmith. Again, I'm making the men at arms. I can get piercing upgrades. It'll let me out of this early castle timing, potentially down my opponent. So this is again something you might do as a response if you're facing somebody who is opting to, go with a boom of their own or castle timing of their own, and they're not going to have a lot of units. I can get that second piercing armor upgrade, and then I have complete control over their base. And I'm going to have a replay of a game where I do exactly kind of this opening, which is also why I wanted to show this particular variant of it. So now I've hit castle at about 8:30. You can see here I'm going to have 10 on gold, 8 on wood, so I can start doing things like dropping pastures and other production buildings, maybe a monastery, or sorry, prayer tent if I want to. And then I have the 9 on gold. That'll very quickly get me enough gold to keep these production buildings going, as well as get the iron undermesh and then later the second upgrade for piercing armor. Now, if your castle is a little bit slower because you're making more units or you're doing other things, you might have enough to start the iron undermesh during the age up, in which case, typically I would do the blacksmith first, then the barracks, and then start unit production. So, again, you can kind of do it based on game feel. At this point, once I get 8 or 10 on wood, I'll probably go back to food, get up to food so I can keep unit production up, and we're going to go from here and just kind of, start a men-at-arms massing. And again, you want to take this based on how the game's going. If you don't think you can really pressure your opponent, you might want to drop, say, an archery range or something if I wanted to hit their men-at-arms with crossbowmen, or, a second stable if I wanted to just go for net control and do things like that. And that's basically how this builds work. So from here, you just kind of open and castle with a great economy. Yeah, so thanks.